Hi, welcome to this edition of the Transform Teacher podcast. I'm so excited to have a very special guest with me today, Emily Shickli of Mind, Body, Dharma. Welcome, Emily.
Hi, Meredith. It's so great to see you and chat with you today. And for all of those of you listening and maybe watching on YouTube, really excited to talk about self-care.
Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
met Emily back in January or February of this turbulent year that we've all been experiencing and enduring. And she was immediately someone that I felt a kinship with, and her energy just was very positive, but not in a toxic positive way, just in a very constructive and dynamic way that just felt like something that I wanted to have more of in my life. And so Emily and I chat on Voxer, and we talk about just life and our businesses, and we keep each other going. And Emily really is inspiring to me, and she's what some people call an expander, which means that she kind of shows me, what can be done. Like your dreams are achievable. That's what Emily shows me. And through all of her work that she does for women and anyone out there who just needs a little bit of help with self-care, Emily is your girl or your lady or your woman. And she totally has some revolutionary, transformative programs, and she is just amazing. So I'm so glad to have you with us today, Emily. Thank you.
Aw, thank you so much, Meredith. What a sweet intro.
Yeah.
And, likewise, I just feel like our communication, our relationship and accountability that we have for each other is just so kismet. It really I think we really found each other and really support each other in a genuine way. And I find that the more that women can help build each other up, and especially women who care about self-care and really looking at our full selves and showing up in our power, just the more the merrier.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I know that you have experienced this, and you've gone through your own journey. So can you tell us a little bit about how you've come to creating Mind, Body, Dharma, and what led you to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's funny when thinking about my story, there are a million different ways to start, or like a million different places to start, I should say. And I would say about 8 years ago, I hit my first rock bottom. This is where I was completely stressed out. I was going through a transition from being in the nonprofit and the education space. I actually used to teach, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was applying to PhD programs, master's programs, and I was recovering from an emotionally abusive relationship. And I moved back home with my parents and just kind of hit this point where my anxiety and my depression were at an all-time low. And then fast forward a few years, and even though I had made this transition for myself, I'd gone through my master's program and I moved into education and technology, I still felt like there was something lacking. And it was because, again, I was working 14-hour days, 16-hour days, and just burning out. It was like all of this stress and anxiety were building up. And it was at that point that I realized that I had emotions and stress that were actually trapped in my body and showing up through chronic illness and migraines and just overall not wanting to do what I had worked so hard to put myself into, which was this new career. And even though I had lots of positive relationships, I just felt like something was missing and I had lost direction for my life, even though, from the outside, I was doing something that I had put my heart into. And that's when I realized that I needed self-care. I needed to radically stop with paying attention to all of the external influences, things like the shoulds of, you should work out every single morning, you should drink your green juice and meditate for an hour, and like all of these things that we're told that we should do in order to feel balanced.
Mhm.
let alone those other shoulds in career, like reaching inbox zero and yeah, and like being seen for the amount of hours that you're working. And I realized that all of these narratives weren't serving me. They were bringing me back again to another rock bottom, but this time it was so much deeper because I had let it continue.
Mhm.
And it was at that point that I discovered mindfulness and I discovered yoga. And in a very approachable sort of way, I started to integrate it into my life.
Cool.
And let me tell you, it was trial and error. Okay. I was not an expert at that point. I had been ignoring my body and my mind body connection for so long that it really took some effort. And it took working with medical doctors, it took working with naturopaths and acupuncture and all these different things. But eventually I figured it out. I
Hmm.
figured out that so often we're paying attention to these shoulds that we forget to listen to what's a must inside of us, what's actually connected and feels aligned. Yeah. And
You
yeah,
on
and it was like this huge epiphany, exactly. Where it's like, you know, we have all these pressures, people telling us what we should do in order to be worthy, when
Mhm.
in reality, if we get quiet, chances are we know what's going to resonate. And it's super scary to decide to follow that. But when we do and we bolster ourselves, we bolster our spirit with self-care that does actually resonate, not the shoulds,
Mhm.
that's when we're fully supported so that we can reclaim our personal power.
Wow, I love that so much because that is those shoulds. I love when people say stop shoulding all over yourself,
Yeah, totally.
and it really is this fear and like anxiety that builds up when we let those shoulds take over. And what you just said, we know that we're not supposed to listen to the shoulds, but you just kind of explained why, because we're not listening to the musts. Like you must
Mhm.
get rest, you must um, all the things that are encompassed in self-care. And when you said, you know, meditate for an hour and drink your green juice every day and work out every day, I'm like, oh wait, I don't have to do that. Like, cause I feel
Right.
like, oh, I have to do that every day. And it's like, there are so many days when it doesn't happen. And
Mhm.
um, for you to just give permission right now, like you're still going to be enough if you don't do all of those things. And if you're not superwoman. And it's so important to be reminded of that. So thank you. Um,
Yeah.
and I know that you specialize in bite-sized self-care. Will you explain what that means? Because a lot of times well, I think sometimes people don't even know what self-care means. So will you
Mhm.
explain what self-care means and what you do with your bite-sized self-care work?
Yeah, definitely. So, well, first of all, I love the permission slip analogy that you mentioned. So consider this, everyone who's listening, this is your permission slip. And I actually encourage my coaching clients to write one out for themselves. I know it sounds kind of silly, but write your own permission slip to ditch the shoulds and sign it. And it is amazingly freeing,
Cool.
amazingly freeing. So highly recommend trying that out. So what is self-care? This is a question I get a lot, and I love that you asked it. I I define self-care as something that you're doing now to benefit future you.
Mm.
So oftentimes we make choices to benefit now, like watching, you know, hours and hours of Netflix. That feels great in the moment, but then when we go to bed at 2 a.m., it doesn't feel great. And
Yeah.
so the self-care is something that you're doing to proactively support a better future for yourself. And I think of self-care as the practice of self-love. So a lot of times people think it's the superficial side of self-love, but I actually think it's more the practice of it. Because when you practice self-care, you give yourself an opportunity to deepen your self-love, which elevates your self-worth. So it really all just feeds into each other. And I know you're an English teacher, right? So thinking about these two words, if you break it up, it's with the hyphen, self and care. It's literally just caring for yourself. And that's why the shoulds aren't serving you, because they're not self declared.
Mm-hmm.
They're not self-aligned. They're other-aligned. It's not other care, it's self-care. So bite-sized self-care is all about shifting to that point of view and getting really clear intuitively what is going to resonate with you today. So instead of sticking with this hours-long routine, no matter your energy, no matter your time, it's really about adapting to your actual needs.
Mm-hmm.
So an example would be you wake up and you had planned a workout, but you're exhausted from the day before. So adaptable self-care would be doing a meditation instead. Or maybe you wake up and you didn't get out of bed when your alarm went off. We all have those moments, right? You hit snooze and you're like, oh, man. That's when you do 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just do 5 minutes of journaling. It doesn't have to be this elaborate routine every single day. I studied a lot of the psychology behind habits and the neuroscience of how habits actually get formed. And the key isn't the length of time, it's the amount of repetitions.
Yeah.
So as long as you are repeating the same structure of your habit, like alarm goes off, sit down and journal and then go into your day,
Mm-hmm.
you will still have that habit getting ingrained in your mind, which is for the purpose of just making your life easier, putting it on more autopilot. The bite-sized piece of that is that it doesn't have to be these hours. And I actually specifically use a technique called the Pomodoro technique. And if you've heard of it, but if you haven't heard of it, it is actually a productivity technique created by this Italian guy who was a university student and needed an effective way to study and motivate himself. And so he would set a timer for 25 minutes and then have a 5-minute break. And this concept of time chunking, I know you're all educators here, so I probably don't even need to explain this to you, right? Is really effective for keeping your mind engaged. And I find the most beneficial and effective way for self-care is when we really integrate these different strategies, things from education, things from the corporate world, and things from the Eastern world, so that it's not just this one-sided technique, but rather a more holistic approach.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful, because a lot of the times we hear that self-care is bubble baths and massages, and we don't really know the purpose behind it. We just know that people tell us that we should do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you kind of define it as it's benefiting yourself and it's a way of you caring for you, well, sitting there and meditating for a full hour might not work for you. So the way that you phrase that is adapting to what you need in that moment. And I feel like if you have someone in your life, teachers out there, you're always caring for your students, of course, but sometimes our children or our students need different things. And so adapting to their needs comes so naturally for us, but adapting to our needs can be challenging. So why do you think it is such a challenge for busy women, busy teachers, busy moms, anybody out there? Why is it so hard to listen to what we must do to take care of the future self inside?
Yeah. You could call it even differentiated self-care, right? To use an education term.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true in that, especially as women and especially as educators, just from my past experience, and it sounds like you resonate as well. And I imagine being a mom, although I don't have children, but it's that the tendency is to put everyone else's needs above your own. And part of that comes from a genuine, deep caring for impacting others in a positive way. That's really the main reason why someone will go into education or become a mom and all of these great things and help support other people in their lives. The challenge is that because of our dualistic culture, So one thing versus the other. We tend to think that supporting other people's needs means that we don't support our own, that like one is more important than the other, instead of the more holistic approach, more Eastern approach, that actually there's both and.
Mm-hmm.
Both your needs and other needs are important.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to, and that's kind of more the mindset approach. And another way to look at it as is that, yes, you have a finite amount of time. You have a finite amount of energy. And I talk about this a lot with my coaching clients. I think it's important that we address that. And that doesn't mean that we need to be in a space of lack.
Yeah.
We don't need to be in a lack mindset of like, I don't have enough, therefore everyone else's needs is more important.
Yeah.
Right? Instead, we can collaborate with this concept of time and energy as being finite and use that knowledge to our advantage and say, okay, I have a set amount of time and I have a set amount of energy. How can I effectively plan my day so that I am paying attention to how my energy responds to the way that I'm spending my time? So really looking at these two things together, and then it just becomes a process of prioritization. Yeah. So filling up your cup, I know this is cliche and it's said so many times, but filling up your cup before you're able to really help someone else is so, so true. You can think of it like, and I think actually Meredith, you even mentioned this metaphor to me in one of our Voxers, of like filling up your car at a gas station, right? Where it's like you're driving along and and your tank is running on empty, but you got to go pick up your kids. You're not going to keep driving to go pick them up because once you get there, you can't get home. So you're going to stop at a gas station, fill up your car, and then go get them so that you can actually make it back home. It's the same thing with your self-care. And I think the more that we think about it as a both and, the less it'll feel like we're sacrificing time and energy that could have been spent on someone else for ourselves.
That's awesome. You just kind of reminded me of, in the education world, as teachers, sometimes students will come back and tell us something that they remembered that we taught them or said. And when you just said that analogy, I totally didn't remember what you were talking about. And then I vaguely remembered it. And it reminded me how, as teachers, we are really making indelible impacts on our students. We're making little impressions. We're forming them, whether we know it or not. And we've done so many wonderful things as teachers, but we've also made mistakes. I know I've made mistakes when I haven't taken care of myself and I've snapped at students, or I've handled my anxiety in a way that just manifested itself in a way that I was not proud of, and or I was just not my best. I wasn't energetic. My cup was not filled. So my question is, for the women out there who thinks that self-care is a little bit selfish, and even though you just explained that it can be a both and thing, what are the dangers? A lot of times I think people think that self-care is like some sort of luxurious thing that you might get to on the weekend if you have time, but why is it so imperative that self-care goes toward the top of your list every day? What are the dangers of, I kind of touched on it just a little bit, but what are more of the pitfalls and the things that we have to lose if we don't really prioritize self-care?
Yeah. I think it's really important to integrate just in general. And so when we treat self-care as something other than our lives, then we have the danger of almost dissociating in a way, of splitting ourselves up into these little areas that aren't connected, and thinking that in isolation we can have all of these different things happen, when in reality we are one person. And so if you think of like, oh yeah, I'll get to self-care on the weekend, rather than like thinking, oh, I just taught a class. Now I'm going to go for a walk outside for 5 minutes,
Yeah.
or I'm going to stretch my arms because I'm hunched over on my computer doing distance learning or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That 5 minutes is going to prolong your gas tank. Versus if you put it into the weekend because you're compartmentalizing your life in that way, then you will be burnt out by the time you even get to the weekend. And if you're thinking about your energy as a gas tank, might not even have energy to do the self-care. And it just perpetuates and builds almost like a snowball rolling down a mountain and getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So that then you might end up at this burnt out state when you could have prevented it. Not to put the blame on you, but it's mainly just that you don't have the system that would support you, like a new worldview. I think this definitely ties into something that I talk a lot about, which is that the old model of work-life balance does not work. It is outdated because, especially for teachers, you're constantly planning, you're constantly grading, and you're teaching, and then you have students coming to you, and then you have meetings, right? So that by the end of your workday, it might be 9 p.m., 10 p.m., and then your quote unquote life starts.
Yeah.
The problem with that approach is that it sets you up thinking that you're failing.
Yeah.
When in reality, work-life balance is fluid. We have one life. We don't have these two lives. We don't have a work life. We don't have a life. We are integrated humans. And so the more that we treat self-care in that way, then we don't get to the stressed out state I shared at the beginning, where maybe chronic stress leads to oftentimes chronic illness, whether that's heart problems, like not to be doomsday, but there are a lot of health challenges, very real health challenges that I've seen not only in myself, but in my clients that pop up because of stress. But the good news is that it's totally reversible for the most part, in the sense that when you start prioritizing having true balanced energy, that's when you're better able to show up in every aspect of your life.
Yeah. I love that. The concept of integrating it moment by moment and not compartmentalizing, because that kind of is countercultural sometimes. I think we're not conditioned to look at it that way. So that's really cool. I accept that challenge. I'm going to go for a 5-minute walk sometime between classes today, because I often think, oh, I got to go for a full 90-minute run, or whatever. Not like I'm going to run for 90 minutes, but like, it's got to be like this huge thing, and it doesn't have to be. What are the programs that you have available for women who are just looking to take their self-care to the next level, or who are just done and they just need some help? What are some things that you do to help them?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So I have a variety of different programs. The one that I recommend the most to people who are feeling overwhelmed, stressed out, trapped under their massive to-do list, and not really finding time or energy for self-care is my Bite-Sized Self-Care Bootcamp program. And this is where I work in one-on-one type of coaching relationship with women who need that extra support. And there are a couple different containers I can talk about. There's an 8-week program and a 4-month one, where we dive deep into your time. So really starting to look at your time, how you feel about the way you're spending your time, what your actual schedule looks like. There's so many surprises here. We tend to think we know. And then finding little snippets, these bite-sized moments for you to inject self-care. And I teach a lot about the psychology of habit, how you can create them sustainably, how you can bolster your productivity throughout the day. And then the second half of our work together goes deep into energy. So exploring emotion, how emotions happen in our body, how they can get trapped in our body, how you can clear that energy, diving deep into your unconscious mind, your shadow. So all of those old stories that might be jingling around in your brain, keeping you stuck and in your present reality, and helping you shift them deeply and energetically so that you can show up in your power. So as I mentioned earlier, time and energy go together. So all of the programs, whether it's this boot camp where I do private coaching or one of my online self-study programs, it's all about bringing time and energy together because that's where you can make meaningful change.
So cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
So where can people find you on Instagram and Facebook and website?
Yeah.
Tell us all that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so Meredith's going to put some links in the show notes for you all. If you're interested in learning more about these coaching programs that I mentioned, really tackling your own time and energy, I would love to, as a gift, offer you a free Balanced Life session. So this is a free 40-minute call where we are going to do a meditation together. I'm going to help you gain some clarity on those big challenges that you have and really paint the path towards the goals that you dream of. And if at the end, it feels like a good fit and we resonate with each other, we can discuss coaching opportunities. And if you're looking for more bite-sized type of support, some quick tips, I have a few recorded meditations and some training videos, definitely sign up on my email list for my to-do list cheat sheet. This is where I'm going to help you really think about self-care outside of the shoulds in a way that is integrated and helps you prioritize just 3 things and insert them into your life. So definitely check that out. And also, of course, I'm on social. So you can find me on Instagram at Mind Body Dharma. And I have a Facebook group for women as well. So feel free to check out those links and I would love to connect with you.
Yeah, I always love popping into your Facebook group and catching your lives when I can. I always get something out of that. So
Oh, thanks.
yes,
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
definitely. Yeah, definitely check out Emily's work. She's got a lot of amazing, people say that self-care is an act of resistance, and you're ready to rise up and claim your own joy and well-being. Emily's your girl to talk to, your lady. I always feel like if you say girl, it's like, I don't know, but
Oh, it's great. It's great.
thank you so much, Emily, for being here today. So grateful for all
Yeah.
you're doing to help us on this important topic. So thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise, Meredith. My pleasure. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm just so excited to have another opportunity to share this really key information with everybody. And I hope that even if, we don't end up connecting, that if you've listened to this and you've taken one nugget away, like that absolutely makes it worth it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Take care, everybody.